Welcome to today's webinar, where we will be discussing the top 5 reasons that leaders lack influence. We'll also be discussing some of the tips that will help you and your organization to hopefully identify some of these behaviors that are keeping you stuck. We want to welcome you in today from all over the world. We've got participants dialing in from Europe and Asia, which is in the middle of the night, so we appreciate their willingness and dedication. And to those of you over here in the United States and Canada and South America that are joining us, good evening or good morning, depending upon where you're calling from. My name's Paul, and I'll be today's webinar moderator. Just by way of housekeeping items as we get started, I want to let everybody know that we will be recording today's event, and we will be sending out a link to the recorded presentation following the event. So we're going to have a full capacity event today. So if you have colleagues that have trouble dialing in or were unable to access the event, tell them not to fret, as we will be sending them a link to the recording and all of the resources. We also encourage you to share what you learned today with those in your organization who maybe couldn't attend. Throughout the presentation today, you're welcome to interact with us and ask questions. You can do so by using the GoToWebinar console. If you happen to be listening through the audio component of the session on your computer and the sound quality isn't as great as you would like, feel free to actually dial in using the phone line. Typically, we find that the audio quality is a little bit better. So today's presentation will last about 55 minutes, and then I'll return at the end to briefly mention a few ways that you can take action on what you learned today. With that, I'm excited to introduce today's webinar speaker, our presenter, Ron McMillan. He's a co-founder of Vital Smarts and a 4-time New York Times best-selling author. He's also a gifted speaker and unrivaled presenter who has advised business leaders across the world on topics ranging from team development to results-oriented leadership. He's also a really good guy and a friend of mine, and I'm excited to have him join us today. And with that, I will hand off the reins here to the one and only Mr. Ron McMillan. Ron, take it away.
Hello, everybody. This is Ron. I'm so glad you tuned in and very anxious to share some very powerful ideas with you. I'm calling you from the base of the Wasatch Mountains in Utah, where it's a pleasant, rainy spring day. I hope the weather's good where you are, and I hope you came in the mood to learn. This will be rapid-fire fashion. I will move at the speed of 10,000 butterfly wings. Now, my assumption beginning this webinar is that all of us have influence problems. We all have problems that can only be solved by influencing other people to do things differently. And we all bring a theory of influence with us to our job, to our problems at home and in the community. And the problem is most of us don't know what our theory of influence is. We've seen things work in the past, we've seen things fail in the past, and we end up trying different things to solve problems, and when they don't work, we get stuck and often give up. So I'm going to try and share with you a theory of influence. That will be a cognitive theory, one that you can hold in your head, one that you can apply to one problem and then turn around and look at a different influence problem and apply that theory to that problem as well, and in so doing dramatically improve results that you and other leaders care about. David Sedaris said, "I haven't got the slightest idea how to change people, but I keep a long list of prospective candidates just in case I should ever figure it out." How many of you have such a list? Okay, raise your hand, don't be shy. If you're sitting alone, raise your hand. If you're sitting in a group, raise your hand. How many of you keep a list of people that you try and influence, sometimes okay and usually not so good? Well, I have such a list. And I've also had this topic as a passion of mine and an object of study for 30 years. In a recent study we conducted here at Vital Smarts, we found out that 19 out of 20 leaders are powerless when it comes to influencing real behavior change. 19 out of 20 leaders are powerless they are unable to do anything to influence real behavior change. For me, that was a startling number when we realized that, because I believe that the essence of leadership is influencing others. In fact, I believe the most important capacity you possess is the ability to influence behavior, that of yourself or others. Think of that for a minute. What's your job as a parent? As a parent, you have to raise and nurture your children. And one of the essential skills you need as a parent to be successful in your job as a parent is to be able to influence the behavior of your children. How important is it to your success as a parent to influence your toddler not to go out in the busy street, or to influence them not to take a fork and stick it in an electrical outlet? One of the key capacities as a parent is to influence your children. Does that change when they become teenagers? I think not. In fact, sometimes it becomes even more important that you're able to influence their choices, which could have life-affecting consequences. Well, this also doesn't change when we step into the workplace. You're doing a great job, and so someone anoints you with a magic wand and makes you a supervisor. And now you don't do the job that produces the results. You influence people to do the job to produce results. The core of your job description as a supervisor, a manager, an executive, a leader, as a person who has peers that they need to influence, is the capacity to influence the behavior of others. But it doesn't stop there. By raise of hands, how many of you currently, your knowledge of good health and nutrition exceeds your practice of good health and nutrition? I got my hand up too. How important is it that we're able to influence ourselves to do things we know that we should do? Okay, let me give you a little exercise, and we'll kind of help you discover what your theory of influence is. Now, some of you out there are too young to know this example, but those of us with gray hair, we can remember a world. We were actually raised in a world where there was no such thing as guaranteed overnight delivery. Now, some of you can't even comprehend how that world could have existed, but it did. I lived at a time when there was no such thing as guaranteed overnight delivery. And a company that changed the world is Emery Air Freight. And they came up with two very powerful ideas that shifted the paradigm of freight. First one was a hub and spoke system. Now, a hub and spoke system doesn't make a lot of sense. If you want to send a package from Reno, Nevada to Las Vegas, Nevada, you give it to the carrier who sends it to Memphis, Tennessee, and there they organize all the packages going to Las Vegas, and they send them together on a plane, and they deliver it overnight. The hub and spoke system dramatically increased efficiencies and the effectiveness in freight system. The second thing they introduced is something called containerized shipping. Instead of throwing all the loose packages into a plane and unloading all the loose packages into a truck, what you do is you load up containers. And then, using equipment, you move containers around instead of 1,000 individual packages. Containerized shipping and hub and spoke systems changed the industry, changed the world, in my opinion. Now, what I'd like you to do is, if you're with someone else, I'd like you to pair up for a 2-minute exercise. This could be in a twosome or a threesome. Look around, make sure no one's left out, invite them to sit by you. If you're all alone, I want you to actually get a pad of paper and a pencil or a pen, and I want you to write down your solution to this problem. The problem is, one of the executives, named Ed Feeney, after the system was in place for a couple years, he went out to collect data and say, how's it operating? You know what he found? Only 45% of the containers being shipped around were being completely filled before being shipped. 45%, almost half of them, were not completely filled. And what they found in their business is wasted space is very expensive. If you only fill a container half full, it takes twice as many containers to move the same number of packages. Ed Feeney was concerned about this and wanted to change it. Now, I want you to picture you're Ed Feeney, okay? You have this problem. What can you do to influence the people who fill the containers to fill them all the way to the top, every time, all the time, without exception? What can you do to influence 1,000 people to fill the containers all the way to the top, every time, all the time, without exception, knowing that there's plenty and even more enough packages to fill each container? So it's not that they don't have enough packages. They've got plenty. They're just not doing it. I'm going to give you 2 minutes. Come up with a strategy. What are you going to do to get those 1,000 employees to fill every container all the way to the full, all the way to the top, every time, all the time? 2 minutes. Go. Ten seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's time. I know some of you are saying that wasn't 2 full minutes, but I'm on mountain time. It's a little different here. Okay, what I want to know is what idea did you come up with? What strategy are you going to use to change the behavior of 1,000 people in your organization? You're Ed Feeney at Emery Air Freight. What are you going to do to solve this problem? Now, I'm going to make a few guesses, and you raise your hand and tell me if that was the one you got. Now, I got an email here that says from Chung Ki-tan, says how to raise hand. What I'm asking you is, even if you're sitting alone, I want you to physically raise your hand. I want this to actually be a kinetic experience. So even though no one can see and I can't see, I want you to raise your hand, okay, when I come across an answer you used. How many of you used a strategy to change the behavior of these workers that would fall in the category of pay and benefit, incentives? You're going to alter the way they're paid to encourage them to fill the containers all the way to the top, maybe through a bonus system or docking pay. You're going to modify their pay and compensation system in order to encourage them to do this. Okay? You know what? Based on past experience, I'm guessing that most of you thought of a strategy that would fall in this category. And you know what we found based on our research? Congratulations to you. Tinkering with someone's pay and benefit system in order to incent the behaviors you want to see happen works. That's a strategy that works. However, it doesn't work every time. It doesn't work all the time, and sometimes creates unintended consequences that fight against the result you're trying to create. Dang. All right? By raise of hands, how many of you said you're going to do some sort of process improvement effort? You're going to get with them, you're going to map the processes, you're going to find out where the waste is, you're going to find out where the slippage is, you're going to redesign the process, and maybe add another policy or two. Process improvement or policy change. You're going to use that as a tool to influence their behavior to change. Raise your hand if you're in that group. Well, if this group is representative of others that I've talked with, I'd say that's the second most common choice that you all picked. And good news, we found that works. But not every time, not all the time, and sometimes creates unintended consequences that fight against the result you're trying to achieve. Dag nabbit. All right. How many of you came up with a strategy that says, we're going to have a communication strategy. We're going to go down and we're going to listen to the people and we're going to tell them why it's important, and we'll have involving exercises to show people the difference of filling them up or not filling them up, and we're going to have everyone sign a poster to commit that from now on they'll fill them to the top. Well, that's the third most common strategy executives use, and we found that it works. But not every time, not all the time, and sometimes creates unintended consequences and pushback that actually fights against the result you're trying to create. Now let me tell you why we did this little exercise together. I wanted you to think about, what is your theory of change? What is your theory of influence? How do you as a leader influence others to change? Well, what we found is that as a society, and especially as leaders and organizations, we lack influence. The most important capacity you possess is the ability to influence behavior, that of yourself and others, whether you're an individual, a parent, or a leader. And yet, very few of us have any systematic way of even thinking about this most precious capacity. Where did your theory come from that you used to solve Ed Feeney's problem? Where did you get your theory? How did you apply your theory to this problem? I'm guessing most of us said, well, what have I seen in the past that works? And I've seen an example of tinkering with the compensation system, changing behavior, and so I'll grab that solution and I'll plug it into this problem. And sometimes it'll work, and sometimes it won't. Most of us have our theory from what we've seen done, either to us or by others to others, and we kind of collect in our mind a collection of strategies, a collection of best practices, but not really a theory that we can then apply to new problems that look very different. So when it comes to our toughest influence challenges, we fail. I believe that leads to a lot of outsourcing, where we can't figure how to get our people changed, so let's outsource it and let someone else who's already figured it out do it. Well, perhaps that isn't all bad, but it sure creates problems when more and more we begin giving up our capacity to control our work. We have identified in our most recent survey that study, which will be available to you on the website with the link we give you, we identified 5 reasons leaders lack influence. The first is leaders think that influence is not their job. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Second, leaders lack competence. They don't know how to do it. Third, leaders lack influence because they confuse talking with influencing. We'll talk more about that as well. Leaders believe in silver bullets. They think if you get one bullet and it's silver, it'll kill the vampire, not realizing that complex, persistent, pervasive problems always have more than one cause. And when you take one solution and assume that's going to solve it, often the problem continues and leaves you exasperated. The 5th reason leaders lack influence is leaders try to influence everyone rather than just those that need to be influenced. All right, let's dive a little deeper into each of these 5 so it helps you understand why well-intended, experienced, smart leaders are unable to influence people to do things differently. Reason 1, leaders think it's not their job. Most leaders put a great deal of time into crafting breakthrough strategies and selecting winning products and engaging analysts and shareholders and major customers. But few realize the success or failure of their grand scheme lies in influencing the behavior of the hundreds or thousands who have to execute on the big ideas, the leader's employees. The most influential leaders spend 50 to 75% of their time thinking about and actively influencing the behaviors they know will lead to top performance. 50 to 75% of the most influential leaders we identified in the study spend that the most influential leaders we studied in this study spend between half their time and 3/4 of their time actively influencing the behaviors that will create the performance they're looking for. But the majority of leaders delegate these duties to others, like HR leaders or staff people who often lack the credibility to influence the real change. The average leader in our study spends less than 5% of his or her time on active efforts to create behavior change. They're focusing on strategy, innovation, big ideas, and then they think that if they just announce them, everyone will comply and the behavior will change. Consequently, the results fall far short of their potential, and employees' behavior falls into predictable patterns of turfism and blame and politics. And we fail to execute on these brilliant ideas that we have as leaders. So number one reason leaders lack influence, they think it's not their job to influence. They think it's their job to come up with brilliant ideas and just announce them. The second reason leaders lack competence is many leaders who had previously stumbled into success at influencing behavior change couldn't really articulate why their efforts succeeded. My guess is their theory of influence was similar to many of our theories of influence. We just try something that we've seen work. And even worse, the study showed that while most executives were frustrated with many behaviors in their organization, only 1 in 20 had a carefully developed plan for introducing change. When leaders were asked to describe their approach to influencing rapid and sustainable behavior change, most had almost nothing to say. For example, one CEO we interviewed in the research took over a company that had stalled financially in recent months. The company was started by a group of highly skilled engineers who would build a wildly successful product. However, the founders now needed to change the culture of the company to focus on quality and execution. Things were going very bad, and the CEO had no real plan for fundamentally changing this behavior. The same CEO described a tremendously effective influence challenge he had tackled in a previous role that dramatically improved customer service, and yet he had transferred almost none of what he had used effectively to this new challenge. Leaders lack competence. They don't know what to do to influence behavior. The third reason that leaders lack influence is leaders confuse talking with influencing. Many leaders think influence consists of little more than talking someone into doing something. It's no wonder most influence efforts start with a PowerPoint presentation. But profound, persistent, and overwhelming problems demand more than verbal persuasion. In fact, we found the most common strategy leaders use to influence change is verbal persuasion. And we found that's the least effective strategies of all of the strategies people use. We just talk to people and think that they'll change. Anyone who's ever tried to talk a smoker into quitting knows there's a lot more to behavior change than words. Well, leaders make the same mistake when they publish a bunch of platitudes in the form of a mission and value statement, give a few speeches on why these values are critical, and then assume their job is done. We define persuasion as trying to get someone to agree or disagree, trying to get a yes or a no from someone. We define influence as getting people to do things differently, changing their behavior. So, when it comes to influencing others to change, most leaders use talking, verbal persuasion, instead of behavior change strategies that work. The fourth reason leaders lack influence is leaders believe in silver bullets. When leaders actually attempt to influence new behavior, they'll often look for a quick fix. They fall into the trap of thinking that deeply ingrained bad habits can be changed with one simple technique. Every leader has his or her pet technique, their best practice, so to speak. Some host a star-studded retreat. Some are all about trinkets, so they hand out inspiring posters and color-changing mugs and think people will line up to change. Some believe it's about incentives and they tinker with the performance management system or tie new behavior to executive bonuses. The research shows that when leaders rely on just one simple source of influence to drive change, they almost always fail. The fifth reason leaders lack influence is leaders try to influence everyone. Can I repeat that? Leaders try to influence everyone. There are a few leaders who understand that influence is their job, but may even put a lot of time and energy into influencing behavior, but they squander limited time and energy by trying to influence everyone in the organization or everyone in the division. The most influential leaders we studied amass a wealth of social capital by investing time and energy with two influential groups in their organization. Number one, their chain of command, and number two, their opinion leaders. Influencers know they don't have to have a personal relationship with everyone in the company. They just have to have relationships with those who do influence the company. If leaders spent time building trust with formal and informal opinion leaders at all levels of the organization in key junctures, they will inherit social capital that extends their influence into every corner of the organization. Now, I realize we covered a lot of things quickly in identifying those five, but I want to spend our time on the solutions that help us overcome those 5 reasons that most leaders fail at influence. Okay, back to movement. I want you to raise your hand. If there's more than one answer you agree with here, more than one result you care about, raise your right hand when I mention it, left hand when I mention another you care about, and back to your right hand. Here we go. By raise of hands, what could you do with more influence? How many of you really feel strongly about influencing people to boost customer satisfaction scores? How about dramatically reducing mistakes? Anyone care about improving employee satisfaction scores or forging productive manager-employee relationships? How many of you care about improving employee engagement or creating a culture of accountability? How many of you care about getting compliance with new processes or policies? Or get projects in on time, on budget, and on specs? Oh, you're getting tired raising your hand? You're flapping like a bird. How many of you care about moving your new strategy from PowerPoint into reality or translating your espoused values into day-to-day behavior? How many of you would like to engage everyone in cost management? The reason I go over this list of results, we have documented organizations who are going after one or more of those results who have used this process to achieve dramatic improvements in every result listed there. So if you cared about one or more, you want to know what this methodology is, and I'm going to share it with you. Keep in mind that in most cases, to change a result, you must influence someone to change their behavior. It's the essence of leadership. So how do you do it? We wanted to answer this question, and for almost 20 years have studied the problem, how do you change behavior? And we've had a lot of success in helping organizations change their culture, which is kind of one of the most profound changes you can make. We wanted to know, what are others doing? Using some university interns who are really smart, we reviewed over 17,000 articles published in refereed journals on human behavior change to identify the best and most tested methods. We also began a study in the year 2000 of influencers, leaders and scholars all around the world who had, number one, succeeded where others had failed in major problems, and number two, had the data to prove it. We wanted to go visit them. We flew over 100,000 miles visiting these influencers with a video camera and a team. We interviewed the influencers. We interviewed the people they influenced, the target of their change. We interviewed their staffs to say, how did you do this? We went to San Francisco and studied at Delancey Street, where over the last 10 years, they've influenced over 14,000 people to significantly change their behavior. And the people they work with at Delancey Street, you don't even get into Delancey Street unless you have 5 felony convictions and are currently addicted to either heroin, cocaine, alcohol, meth, or a combination. And their success rate is 92% of their graduates' 2-year program never return to prison, even 10 years later, and 93% never return to their addiction. They're addiction-free and productive members of society. We want to know, how did they do that? And we found out. We went with Don Hopkins to Africa, where the Carter Center was trying to eradicate a horrible a parasite called the guinea worm. Infected over 3.5 million people. The problem with this parasite, there's no vaccine that'll prevent it, no medicine that'll cure it. They have to change the behavior of 20 million people in 19 different countries around their behavior with water in order to eradicate the guinea worm. From 3.5 million in 1988, there's now less than 1,000 cases on Earth. And the reason they're not cured yet is they're in Somalia, where a war is going on and the aid workers can't get into them. How did they get 20 million people to change their behavior? Well, these are examples of some of the leaders that we studied. And we added the article information and books, our study of influencers with our experience in changing organizations. And we found that almost all of these successful influencers had either studied under Dr. Albert Bandura of Stanford or studied under someone who had studied under Albert Bandura at Stanford. He articulated a profound theory of change that these people are putting into practice. Now, he's the most cited psychologist of the last decade. And we worked intimately with him on how to change business organizations. Well, enough of the mystery. I teased you long enough. What did we learn? How do these influencers change behavior? Well, we developed a model based on what we learned that is 3 simple parts. It begins where all of these influencers began. They began by clarifying measurable results. What is it we're trying to change? How will we measure it? How will we know we're making progress toward it? And how will we know when we've succeeded? So everything all of you know about SMART results, about documenting results, about time-bound results, all of that applies, and I'm so glad you already know that. So I'm not going to take any more time on that. But that's the starting point. What result are you trying to achieve? And that was the starting point at Emory Air Freight. Well, one of the influencers we studied is Mike Miller, and he had a huge challenge at Sprint. He was given 18 months to improve productivity in a 3,500 person IT organization. But he had 18 months to improve productivity by 50%, improve quality, and reduce severity 1 defects by 50%, meet product release schedules 100% of the time, and parenthetically, none had been met in the last 3 years, and improve employee satisfaction by at least 10%. Now, would you consider that a challenge? Well, he succeeded, and in fact, exceeded those goals. We studied him, and we wanted to know how he did it. So I'm going to use Mike's experience as an example of the model that I'm going to teach you. Once you've identified the results, and those were the results that Mike Miller had to get, and he had to do that in an 18-month period, by the way. The second thing, and this is not intuitive, this is something that people have thought long and hard about that we were able to identify in our study. The second thing after identifying the measurable results is finding the vital behaviors. Now, for any result to be accomplished, it might require 22 different behaviors that people have to enact in order to produce the result. Influencers, they say, what are the vital few behaviors that are the leverage behaviors, that if people do these, everything else will follow? Here's the big idea with vital behaviors, is even with complex and long-standing problems, just a few vital behaviors can lead to enormous change. Find the vital behaviors and find a powerful leverage point for change. We were asked to help a sales office in a Fortune 500 company. They were organized by region, and the sales offices in several of the regions had continued growth in sales and were doing great. Many were getting so-so improvements, and some were actually falling off. And so what we did is we went in search of vital behaviors. They wanted to improve sales in those offices where the sales were flat or falling. We looked for positive deviance. We wanted to know what were the very best doing that the rest were not. And so we studied the behaviors and mapped them out of the very best salespeople in the very best offices and compared them with the others. You know what we found? This was the single vital behavior that differentiated the salespeople and the offices. Those who succeeded made 10 cold calls every day. Now, there are a lot of other behaviors you have to do to be successful in sales, but the differentiator was those who made 10 or more cold calls every single day exceeded dramatically, and those who made less than 10 cold calls a day didn't. And so we identified, if you want the others to succeed, that's the vital behavior you as a leader need to focus on. So let's define vital behavior as a high leverage action that if routinely enacted will lead to the results you want. One of the ways of finding those vital behaviors is you don't want that, they don't need to do that vital behavior all the time every day. So you look for the crucial moments, the point in time where the right behavior, if enacted, leads to the results you want. It's like you're driving down the freeway and you look ahead in your lane and realize your lane exits the freeway. That's the crucial moment. If you stay in this lane, you're going to exit the freeway. If you want to continue on the freeway, you've got to change lanes. So when that crucial moment occurs, the vital behavior will get you to the result you want. And so as you look for crucial moments, it often helps you to identify the vital behavior that needs to be enacted. Let's go back to Mike Miller. As Mike did a series of interviews and focus groups, talked to some real smart people in the organization, he began to realize that there were crucial moments in the day-to-day operations when someone's actions either build or destroy accountability. And Mike realized their problem was accountability, that people weren't held accountable, that often they'd get cross-functional teams to work on a problem, make assignments, and then people would reconvene 2 weeks later and no one had done anything and no one said anything about it. Found that people weren't reaching their time goals, their individual time goals, their individual production goals. There was a lack of accountability. So he wanted to know, what are the crucial moments when you decide, make a decision that will create a culture of accountability or will continue the current culture of no accountability? He found when plans, schedules, or resources seem unrealistic, that's a moment where if nothing is said and nothing is challenged, it almost dooms the projects. He also found when others fail to keep commitments, that's a crucial moment when holding someone accountable or not will help create a culture of accountability or not. The other crucial moment was when managers failed to provide the support they promised. Well, identifying these crucial moments led to Mike and his team, with our help, identifying the vital behaviors that people need to enact in those crucial moments which would then build a culture of accountability where we create accountability, hold each other accountable, and produce the results that we need to produce. He found when plans, schedules, or resources seem unrealistic, the vital behavior is for people who are aware of this to speak up. They had a culture of fear where people were afraid to challenge their boss, they're afraid to hold their peers accountable, and he found the solution was if we could get people to speak up respectfully, if we could create enough safety that people feel they can speak up, we could create this culture we're looking for. The second crucial moment when others fail to keep commitments, he identified the vital behavior as speak up respectfully. And the third, when managers fail to provide support, speak up respectfully. He had identified the vital behaviors that if everyone does all the time, will directly create the results he was looking for. Well, just because you've identified the results and the vital behaviors, that's not the end. We're not suggesting that once you find them, your challenges are over. Rather, it's a whole new challenge to influence people to actually do the vital behaviors. And that's where the next element of the model comes in. What we learned is at any given time for everyone, whether you're at home, at work, or in the community, whether you're trying to influence your children or community leaders or your own employees, there are 6 sources of influence that influence us at any moment, every moment, and that influence whether or not we'll engage in the vital behavior. These influencers we studied to achieve such amazing success, we found that they used every aspect of the influence model, and especially used the 6 sources of influence to influence people to do what they were supposed to do. So let's examine these 6 sources of influence. The 6 sources of influence are built upon Albert Bandura's theory. Albert Bandura's a social learning theory says if someone's going to engage in a behavior, they've got to want to do it. They have to be motivated to do it. And they must have the ability to do it. Imagine telling someone, here's the vital behavior I want you and your team to do, and they don't want to. Is it going to happen when you leave? Probably not. What if they want to do it? They say, wow, that's important. We really want to, but they don't know how, or they don't have the resources. Is it going to happen? Probably not. What if they really want to do it and they have the ability to do it? Then Albert Bandura says it's likely to happen. You increase the probability of success dramatically. So if you take motivation and ability and say these are the sources of influence that we want to influence in a positive way, you then say what influences our motivation and ability? The first row there is personal. Left to ourselves with no other influence, do I want to do what's being asked? It might be an unpleasant task, but because I'm a miner, I go under an unbolted roof and I bolt it tight so that the rock doesn't fall on anyone. And though that's an unpleasant, even a dangerous task, I want to do it because that's who I am. I'm a miner. Okay? That would be an example of personal motivation. Source 2, personal ability. Do I have the skills to do what you're asking me to do? Do I have the technical skills? Do I have the business acumen? Do I have the knowledge and experience? If not, then that's going to prevent me from doing what you asked me to do. We also found social really impacts motivation and ability. The people around me and their opinions, in fact, their willingness to accept me or exclude me have a huge impact on my motivation. I often need others to help me do what you're asking me to do. The third is structural. These are the non-human factors in our environment and the way our life is structured. These are things like compensation, commission. These are things like performance appraisals. Those non-human factors that affect our motivation. And source 6 are structural ability. Does the environment give us or restrict our ability to do the vital behavior? And this has to do with cues, data. It has to do with the physical environment. Now, here's what we found. Most leaders, because they use silver bullets, they'll use one source of influence to try and get people to do what they need to do. We found that if you have one source of influence working for you as a leader and 6 or 5 are working against you, then the vital behavior you want the people to enact will not happen. So let's go over our model real quick. It begins by clarifying measurable results. What do you want to achieve? We analyze that. Then going from right to left, you see the gray arrows at the top, we analyze what are the vital behaviors that will produce those results. Then we analyze where are the 6 sources of influence currently in place relative to the vital behaviors. Which ones are a plus that will influence people to do it? Which ones are a negative that will influence people not to? How can we create a plan to make sure all 6 sources are influencing people to do the vital behavior? Now, once the plan is in place, you execute from left to right. And you'll notice the green arrows. You use the 6 sources of vital behavior, 6 sources of influence to get people to enact the vital behavior. And as they regularly, consistently enact the vital behavior, it'll produce the results you're after. For the results, what do you want to achieve? Number 2, what few vital behaviors will lead to the greatest amount of change? And number 3, how will you motivate and enable that change? Now, this is a lot of information to give in a short period of time, but there's some key ideas here. And let me hone in on those key ideas. And these can be strategies that you can use to increase your influence. Keep in mind that the influencers we studied succeeded where the rest of us fail because they over-determine success. They don't leave it up to chance. They marshal a critical mass of all 6 sources of influence to make change inevitable. They don't just pull up a trick that they saw used somewhere else with a different problem and hope it'll work here. They make sure that all 6 sources of influence are driving the vital behaviors which will create the result the leader wants. So let's take source 1, and I'm just going to quickly go through these to give you a sense of how they work. Personal motivation, source 1. Human beings are capable of profoundly transforming their experience of almost any behavior by anchoring it to deeply held values. This is how Mimi Silbert at the Delancey Street got people to quit drugs. She helped them find deep underlying behaviors that the use of drugs were violating. We found that influencers help others make undesirable behaviors become meaningful by connecting those behaviors with human consequences. We've seen hospitals do amazing jobs at these. One place I saw, they put nurses in three nurses in 3 patient beds, and they had to stay there for a week while they were served up by the staff there who thought they had a condition they didn't. And at the end of that week, those nurses wanted so much to help patients. They saw the problems that they create for patients, and they went around to different parts of the hospital telling about their experience. And people began to realize that the tasks they were being asked to do that were noxious or unpleasant had a huge impact on serving others, which is a value they cared deeply about. Making that connection helps create very strong motivation. What did Mike do? This is brilliant. Mike had small teams of software engineers rotate into the call centers to live the lives of the call center operators. These software engineers had the experience of customers saying, this doesn't work, it's not working for me, it's causing me all these kind of problems. And they began thinking about innovative solutions. It impacted their personal motivation to want to do their job well when they saw the impact it had on other people, their customers. Source 2, when we as leaders are asking someone to do something, we've got to assess, do they have the skills to do it, or we have to skill them up. That's personal ability, source 2. The problem here is many vital behaviors are far more physically or emotionally challenging than we realize. When you have someone on the front lines with employee complaints or customer complaints, they need some really specific skills that help them remain pleasant with a customer who's cursing them. What is that skill? Have they learned it? Do they possess it? We found that as leaders, we grossly underinvest in building those skills, especially the emotional skills. So here's the question to ask yourself as a leader if you're asking people to engage in new behaviors. Have you coached, taught, and mentored your people so they feel highly confident in using the vital behaviors, even in difficult circumstances? If they are unable to use the skills or do not feel confident, then they need more skill development before you throw them into the difficult situation. You know what Mike did to increase personal ability of his organization? Mike and his managers personally led training on skills for speaking up at crucial moments. By the way, just between you and I, don't tell anyone but your friends, we introduced the Crucial Conversations training, and then Mike and his managers became the trainers for that program to their organization. In the training, frontline employees practice these skills with managers and more senior colleagues. And so they would set up a situation in a meeting where someone thinks this won't work because we haven't assigned adequate resource, and they say, now what crucial conversation skill would you use to speak up in this meeting? And the trainees would practice it with Mike, the senior vice president, and with some of his direct reports who were actually doing the training. So not only learning the skills, but practicing using them with senior leaders. They then, of course, their supervisors went through it, managers went through it, and part of the training was practicing it with these new skills of speaking up with each other. That's pretty powerful skill development. You want more influence? We found any attempt to motivate the unable, people who aren't skilled or knowledgeable, creates depression, not change. Be a teacher first. Make sure they have the skills and understand what you want them to do. Then a motivator second. Well, source 3 and 4 is the sources that most of us are familiar with. That's peer pressure. That's the influence others have on our desire and ability to do the job. If you tell employees you want them to do this vital behavior, but all their peers say you're a kiss-up if you do, then it probably won't happen. The social system becomes very important to get working for you rather than against you. This would be key opinion leaders, people whose opinion sways a lot of opinions. It would be key managers, leaders, supervisors. Get them on board so that they, in fact, see the importance of making the change, and as they vocalize and encourage the change, it's much more likely to happen. What Mike did is he asked highly respected team members to be mentors. They were given the Crucial Conversations training in holding others accountable before anyone else received it. And some of these were first-line supervisors. Some of them had no supervisory position, and some were middle-level management and executives. After 30 days, or excuse me, 30 days, for 30 days, they were to take the new skills and go out and use them in the workplace and model speaking up respectfully. Then after 30 days, each of them enlisted a colleague to join them to attend the training and then join them in speaking up during those crucial moments. And then those went out and enlisted a colleague and said, together we're going to do this. Had a powerful impact on the culture as others saw these highly respected individuals speaking up respectfully in these critical moments. It gave them permission to do it and showed them how. Once they had the training, they went to a culture that was changing, and they were very happy to participate in. Source 5, structural motivation. Design rewards and demand accountability. We studied a consulting firm that when their consultants were on the road, with the client, they had billable hours. When they weren't on the road, they didn't. So they wanted to incent people to get on the road and get more billable hours. So they rewarded the people for each night they spent on the road. And at the end of the year, the Warrior of the Year got a $10,000 prize, cash prize. Boy, that created a lot of energy and excitement. However, you know what we found? For 4 years in a row, these winners quit the firm the same year they won the prize, citing work-life balance issues. Changing incentives changes behavior, but not every time, not all the time, and sometimes not in the way you want. That can't be the influence strategy you use alone. A single source strategy doesn't work. You know what Mike did? Mike and his direct reports put 40% of their bonus pay at risk, not on the business results alone, but on achieving the vital behaviors. 40% of their bonus was based on the organization achieving the vital behaviors. They tracked this using monthly pulse polls, where they would do a quick and dirty survey, and people would report whether they were speaking up or not, whether they felt safe to speak up or not, whether they saw others speaking up or not, and that formed the scores which affected their bonus. This got their attention on those pulse polls. They cared about them. They were really excited and felt of the vital importance to change those behaviors. The vital behaviors were eventually added to the performance appraisal process. So the part of the appraisal was, do people enact these behaviors, and they were rated based on that. The last source of influence is source 6. This is the structural factors that affect our ability to do the vital behavior. What Mike found is one of the key things for them was getting data. And so the pulse polls actually was a source 6 strategy that collected data and presented it to them. They posted it regularly. They reviewed it regularly. Putting signs up in place reminding people of the vital behaviors, collecting data on it, sharing that data. The main idea here in source 6 is make it easy to do the good things. And if people are reminded of it, it makes it easier. Make it harder to do the bad things. Make it more, change the environment so it's more difficult to do the things that are contrary to the vital behavior. There was an interesting case study when all the soldiers were coming back after World War II, and many of them were trained cooks, and the restaurants would hire them, and most of the servers were women. The women would get the order from the customer, come back and tell the cook what to cook and the way to cook it. And then she'd wait at the counter, and if they're taking too long, she'd say, hurry it up, they're waiting. And the cooks resented women telling them what to do. That was the way it was in those days. And the men were not only saw themselves in the senior position, but they're paid a lot more, and they shouldn't have to put up with junior people, women, telling them what to do. And there were huge conflicts, and often they would wait on an order for 20 minutes till it was cold and then give it to the waitress, and there were tremendous fighting and squabbling. So what happened is they got a professor by the name of White, and they said, what can you do to solve this problem for us? Do we need team building? Do we need a therapy session to say, why don't I like women bossing me around? Do they need skills? What do we do to help solve this problem? And Dr. White invented a source 6 strategy. He changed the environment and the data flow in order to change behavior. Do you know how he did it? He invented something called the order wheel. Order goes in, first order out. You write instructions, and you dissolve the conflict. That's an example of the power of our environment, the power of source 6 solutions. Well, you remember Emory Air Freight? Ed Feeney solved that problem what did he do? Well, he knows that only 45% of the containers are being completely filled. Wasted space is very expensive. What Ed Feeney did is he went out and interviewed the employees who were loading the boxes, the crates. And if you go through his interviews, you can actually divide them into 6 sources. He investigated each source. He asked people, do you like your job loading the boxes and crates? And they go, yeah, it's not bad. It's better than a lot of jobs my friends have. Source 1 was a positive. Source 2, do you know how to operate the equipment? Do you know how to place the boxes and the packages? They said, yes, we're well trained. Source 2 was a plus. Source 3 and 4. Tell me about the people you work with. When you're behind, do they jump in and help you? Oh, yeah, we got a phenomenal team. We pitch in, help each other. When they're behind, I help them. They help me. They always encourage us to do our best. It's a great team. I love working with them. He found sources 3 and 4 were positives. Source 5, tell me about your pay. Well, each person interviewed said, I'd like more, but compared to my neighbor, for what I'm doing, it's a good pay. Source 5 was a positive. As he investigated the problem, he found out that in our vocabulary, source 6 was the problem. That's their environment. They wanted to do it, but sometimes they got rushed. And they just load it up and the plane's ready and they send it out, forgetting to load it all the way to the top. Ed Feeney solved this problem by painting a line inside each box at the top that said, fill to here. The rate of properly filled boxes rose to 95% within a single day and was sustained throughout the next 2 years. All he did to solve that, he didn't tinker with their pay. He didn't reskill them. All he did was paint the line to the top. Now, if those other sources weren't in shape, if they hated their job, if they got razzed when they did what management told them, if supervisors just cared about rushing it out and didn't care about filling it to the top, painting the line would have done nothing. But when you have the other 5 sources in place, adding the 6th source, virtually guaranteed the success of his strategy. Well, the influencers we studied succeed where the rest of us fail because they over-determine success. How do they do that? They marshal a critical mass of all 6 sources of influence to make change virtually inevitable. You'll remember there are 5 reasons that we began with that leaders lack influence. We found this process, using these strategies, virtually solve all 5 problems. It gives leaders the confidence to do it. Leaders begin to understand it's the essence of their job. Leaders give up verbal persuasion and start working on the 6 sources of influence. Leaders don't look at single solutions or silver bullets, but they realize they have to have all 6 sources of influence working for them. And they realize that their job is not to influence everyone. It's to influence their chain of command and influence leaders, opinion leaders. And if they get those on board, they'll turn the culture of the organization. Hey, thank you for listening up. And Paul's going to tell you how to dive deeper if you found this of interest or want to know more about it.
Thanks, Ron. I still get a kick out of every time you ask people to raise their hand. It never fails. Let me just sum up and say if you were unable to log on originally and got in late, we apologize. We will be sending you a link to the recording as well as the slides so that you can review all of the content. So we want to thank you for your time today. We're just a little bit past the top of the hour, so I'll just summarize to say that some of the concepts that Ron introduced today are found in our award-winning influencer training. And we'll summarize all of what I'm about to tell you in an email. But we will be sending you an email. Look for that probably within the next 24 hours. It will contain a link to the recording of today's session, the slides, as well as this article there on your screen on how to make change happen. This was an MIT Sloan Management Review article that we won an award for as the Change Management Article of the Year. We'll provide that as well as links to other resources, including the research on the top 5 reasons that leaders lack influence. Also, for attending today, we're offering a 20% discount on any public workshop, influencer public workshop that's happening. We have 12 to 15 of these happening throughout the year in different locations. So we'll send you a link to information on where you can find one in your location. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us. Again, we thank you for your time today. Thank you for listening and participating. And if you don't hear from us within 24 hours with those resources, feel free to reach out to us. Otherwise, we will conclude today's broadcast and look forward to catching you on a future web seminar. Again, thanks to Ron, and we appreciate your time. And have a great rest of your day. Bye now.